Eloise is transformed into Venus de Mars.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Venus.
Sorry about that.
As established, the doorbell was in fact Venus, who Venus is. So Venus overheard the kind of passing of the baton part, where I hope this is okay.
I feel humbled. That was really beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and as established at the beginning of the episode, the reason why any of this is happening at the MCN6 TV station today is because Venus is shooting part of the music video for Venus's upcoming single, which is called Even With Scars.
Even With Scars, yeah.
And will be released at the end of June.
That is
not coincidentally being Pride Month.
Yeah, that's the plan, and I believe it will happen. So, yeah.
And part of the music video has been filmed or will be filmed in St. Mark's.
I'll be recording the choir, and I had no idea how many people would respond to my shout out for trans or non-binary people interested in being part of the choir. I was thinking 10, 15 people 65 people responded. I had to put a stop to it. I was still getting that.
You can only fit so many people in.
Exactly. It was so many. So, and I have a few people driving down from Duluth for it. So yeah, it's going. They've all got the materials. Learning the choir. It's a 3-piece harmony choir. It'll be in the background, but it'll be kind of a surprise element coming out. To have this kind of ethereal choir in the background. But I'll be filming it also. And we're going to be doing that at St. Mark's Episcopal Church Cathedral, which is very LGBTQ friendly and
You and
supportive.
Lynette attend.
Yes, yeah. Lynette is a member. She just drags me along. I'm not religious, but it's a welcoming group of people who is unusual, and it's nice to highlight that.
Absolutely. I was going to highlight the Episcopalian nature.
They have been on the forefront in so many ways, embracing the LGBTQ community, and not the American or the American Episcopal Church. There is a split in that whole thing, the Anglican Church. So that is good for them for doing that. And I hope it permeates the whole of that. But, it's to be seen.
It's so fitting that this song has the choir because, of course, the lyric in the chorus is, "We are free, free as the sky, never so high. We are free, free as the stars, even with scars. We are free." And something that Maeve and Eloise and I were really appreciating about the song, as you heard, as you arrived, is, I think, the juxtaposition of this "we are free" statement, which is as inclusive as it can possibly be, also with the song ending, "Be a friend," with that invitation. What really strikes me as especially powerful about this song is that there is that "we are," and then in the verses, it's "my dream isn't so strange. My dream isn't so hard." And you probably heard us talking about the moving, what was your analogy? Analogy is the right word.
Moving walkway.
Yeah, the moving walkway, yeah. And standing still on the moving walkway is, participating in the momentum. So I think it's such a powerful, we thought it was such a powerful, important address to people on this moving walkway. The simplicity of and the power of you asserting, "My dream isn't so strange, my dream isn't so hard." What thoughts do you have about the way in which this song in the verses takes these statements about my dream and the nature of my dream, and then places that alongside we are free?
Right, yeah. Well, that goes back to just my personal journey. being out there in the early days before we were even recognized as a community. We were just individuals. And I was touring with the band and dealing with confrontation and confusion and biases and misunderstanding constantly. And I found the best way to make a difference was to address people in a welcoming way and on an individual way. So part of that, and I would do that from stage, I would break our set and I would talk to people about saying, we're not that different. You know, you may have been giving me shit from the at the bar before we went on stage, but I can say that not anyone here, there's no one here that doesn't know what it feels like to be an outsider. Every person, I would say, I don't care if you're a lawyer, I don't care what you do, you're CEO, you know what it's like to be an outsider. And that puts us in community. And it more often than not, the majority of time, it worked, and people would, even if they didn't quite get what was going on, they didn't understand, they would appreciate it, and they would come back after the show, and they would remain allies, and I would change them, and change their misassumption, and it works so much better than confrontation. And I just learned that, you know, the hard way, and also I didn't want to get in fights, and so I wanted to bring that sense of community, that it's a song about the trans community. I wanted to empower the trans community to say, it's okay, we'll get through this. We've always been here. I lived the dark days when we had no rights, and I knew how to get around. I knew how to survive. We'll survive no matter what happens. We're going to be here. We're going to be okay. Even if we have to go back underground, we're going to be here. So it's that kind of empowerment I wanted to provide. And then I wanted to expand it to the general public to say, look, chill out. We're all right. We're not something to be afraid of. We are like you. You are like us. Let's be friends. And that's kind of the message. You know, we'll see how everything shakes out in the near run, but in the long run, I think we've always been here. We're always going to be here.
That reminds me of aspects of the song that Maeve appreciated the most. Again, those lyrics: "We are here, every last one. Never will run. Even so, we know fear. Taken in pain, but never in vain." That was something that Maeve really appreciated about the song. Is there anything else? Do you have any questions about the song?
Yeah, I'm curious, because we were also talking about like accountability and like how to connect with people who are like engaging in the oppression of others, and like you have a lot more life experience than I do with this stuff, especially with being out in the 80s, was it? Yeah. And the fact that you have that perspective, especially considering what it was probably like then, like I'm really like both like admiring that you have that perspective and also curious if it's hard to maintain and if you ever feel like you have to let like kind of the anger and like desire for justice to take over your feelings about it.
I did a college talk. My spouse did a memoir of our relationship and how we navigated the whole transition, the whole timeline. And we were at a college in southern Minnesota, and there were just having an intimate talk with some queer youth that were there, and one non-binary young person asked me if it ever stops, the sadness, the oppression, the feeling of being attacked, and I was honest. I said, no, it never stops. It always hurts. You always feel attacked. You always feel on guard. But you learn how to turn that into a superpower. You learn how to use that to change who you are and how you see the world. And if you can transform that sense into a strength for change, you learn how to survive and to get through, and it becomes better.
So almost like it's less exhausting to try to pull people in than to be angry at them.
You can't force anybody to change their mind, but you can encourage them to think about things differently. And often, well, I think the only way you can do that is to plant the seed of doubt that their paradigm of how things should be may not necessarily be rock solid. You can plant that seed, even if you become the exception to their paradigm of what people like me are. If you can become at least the exception, that's the seed, and it will change. And they'll meet other people. And then there's another exception, and then there's another exception. And then they're going to say, well, you know, maybe I'm making an assumption here that isn't necessarily accurate across the board. And they begin to see us as complex humans, just like they are. We are all part of a fabric, and we have all the goods and the bads and the difficulties and the strengths that any other human has. And you can't make an assumption across the board of any group of people. We see that happening over and over and over again, racially, culturally, and right now with the trans community being the focus of the right wing. And it's a persistence of those of us experiencing that oppression to remain strong, to remain clear, and to remain here. That makes the difference.
Last time that you were here at the MTN6 TV station, with me at least, we were discussing, I think, The Darkness, your most recent record. And that three-part conversation of ours ended with focus on the song Jackie Ray,
Right.
which I think relates to what you're saying now. The character Jackie Ray you were sharing back then is based on someone that you encountered when you were performing at Pride in Toronto.
In Toronto, yeah.
Around 2018.
Yeah.
The person who Jackie Ray is based on was a bartender, a trans woman who's a biker as well. And you said at the time in our previous interview that this human kind of embodied the strength that you hope for the trans community.
Oh, yeah.
So what thoughts do you presently have on that song Jackie Ray, which we can hear?
Yeah.
You can hear, the viewer can hear. And on the character Jackie Ray, and perhaps on that experience, because it was Pride, of encountering the character the human who inspired Jackie Ray. But then also how that song starts with Jackie and then expands the empathy to various other characters outside of the trans community, or not necessarily inside the trans community, What thoughts do you presently have about the song Jackie Ray in relation to the competition that we have?
Well, we all have our challenges that we have to survive and we have to get through. And we have to turn into some kind of strength rather than diminishment. In that song, I go through a number of different scenarios, one of which is sobriety. But Jackie Ray is a trans struggle. And then also relationship, intimate relationship with a mother and a child, dealing with the reality of life struggle. And those are the things that we all are faced with. I mean, life is messy. Life is unpredictable. Life is unfair. That's pretty obvious to anybody that's lived beyond a couple of years. I think once even babies understand the unfairness of life. But that's what makes us who we are. I wouldn't think or see the world or react or understand circumstances if I hadn't gone through the pain, if I hadn't gone through the challenging, the oppression, the diminishment, the struggle. Those things, the hardening, that's what makes you who you are. That's what builds your foundation. It changes your brain. It changes how you see the world. You should embrace it. Embrace that. Make it your power.
And in the song Jackie Ray does that, Jackie Ray has achieved, you're saying Jackie Ray is solid. Terry, who is the character that we encounter in verse 2, whose challenge is sobriety, is hopeful. And not solid, but hopeful, and there is hope for Terry. You fucked it all. Is the address to Terry, and maybe the inner voice, Terry's own inner voice. You fucked it all. But there was this the previous record ends with "Our beauty lives inside," and I think that this focus in the conversation that we've all been having today, and that's in the song, in your new single, there is this call to kind of recognize the Jackie Ray in all of us, and the majesty is in all of us, is something that you were saying also at the end of that interview before. You can never give up on anyone is something that you were sharing had been said to you when you were personally affected by someone close, someone you were working with, lack of sobriety, and a person who had achieved this kind of solidness or this foundation after struggling with sobriety, said you can never give up on anyone. Do you have any further thoughts on this radical empathy, which also I think relates to the central image in that previous record of the hat being blown away?
I like the radical empathy.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I don't want to do too much, but I just finished a book that has to do with trauma and surviving trauma.
What was the name of the book?
It's called What Happened to You. The thing about that, it talks about how your brain is affected by trauma, and it changes your brain. So PTSD, childhood trauma, all of those things affect the wiring in your brain and causes you to act in a certain way. But the message, and some of that is like you don't even have control over it. So PTSD, a lot of that happens, and that can be in all forms of things. An argument can trigger it, noise can trigger it. Anything that reminds you of some sort of trauma will will cause your base brain, your primitive brain, to override your intellectual brain, and your immediate response is that reactive place that's triggered from past trauma. And then you have to backpedal after you realize you've done something really stupid, you know. And then you can kind of recuperate and figure that out. But the whole idea of that book is that you can learn if you understand what happened. You begin to heal those ways that your brain communicates to itself under circumstances which reflect that trauma. And you can begin healing and to move into a better place. So answering that question, I think is to recognize exactly what I was saying earlier, that we all experience trauma in some fashion, but that is what calls us to change how we move through the world and move through life. And if we listen to that calling, we can make a difference.
Our capacity to change is enhanced by an understanding of trauma in the brain, and then therefore the ability to recognize, this is a trauma response.
Yeah.
And when a human has a trauma response, the human's brain behaves in this manner.
Well, it can override everything.
Right. And
It's
so,
like I used to say that my, your ego is a wonderful element of it's an engine. It's wonderful fuel. It's a great motivator, but it does not belong in the driver's seat. Does not belong in the driver's seat. And sometimes, no matter what you do, it climbs up there and takes the wheel.
right.
And then it takes all your energy to get it back where it belongs and to make the damage control that you have to, because you let your ego be in the driver's seat and make decisions which shouldn't have been made.
And having a process for recognizing, okay, I'm in the trauma response. Ego is, when I am, then my ego is in the driver's seat. And then perhaps I develop a process for shifting that, okay, ego, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
This isn't where you belong at the moment. I suppose in my experience, through the rare occasion, at least initially, where one is able to do that for oneself, then perhaps it's possible to recognize this.
In other people.
Yes, this person who is locked in this mode and seeming very unattractive to me, they're locked in this mode, and some of the same wisdom can be.
The radical empathy that you're talking to comes with that self-understanding. And when you understand that, you understand that other people have that same capability, and their reaction and how they're dealing with the world comes from that place. Comes from that place of pain. And that's where the empathy comes in. And then how you deal with that, that's a whole nother chapter. How do you communicate empathy without being rejected? It's a process, and it may not happen immediately. It may take a while, but it helps you get through things. It helps you be open to a better landscape, a better forgiving something that happened to you. You can be more open and not hold anger, not hold a grudge. Be willing to let somebody into your life in a non-damaging way, but in an empathetic way, to acknowledge their possible trauma or pain.
Even with Scars is such a well-crafted, powerful, timely song. Jackie Ray is as well. Those are two of my favorite Venus de Mars songs. And again, in Jackie Ray, some of the lyrics are, "You've changed all that I am. I've changed the best that I can." There's Eve, and then another lyric in that previous record, "All of my dreams I pass on to your lifetime." So there's this same focus on change and the possibility of change, the conditions of change, and then also dreams and being intentional about what one's dreams are and what one's dream one is passing on. And I just love, again, the clarity of, this is my dream. My dream is simple. My dream isn't hard to implement. Perhaps so long as we have some understanding of and empathy for what happens what happened to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all there. It's all that. You can tell I've been working on this for a long time.
Yes, exactly. It manifests in these different forms.
I think for me, it's how I've gotten through a lot of the hardships, a lot of the early traumas. I'm writing my own memoir, finishing the manuscript. I hope to get that done this year in time to begin shopping it around. But
more important than the title of the book that you were reading is the titles of Lynette's book and your book.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't have a title for mine yet. Lynette's is Wild Things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Minnesota Historical Society Press. And mine will be my perspective on that journey, of course, including the rock and roll stuff. That is, I've been struggling with it for a long time, just trying to understand what all happened, why. And the writing has been a really wonderful tool to reflect and to learn and to understand myself and how I reacted, how I moved through the world, the decisions I made, the things I regret, all of that.
We were essentially just talking about having personal systems in place for, like, when I recognize this is trauma response, my own. Okay, well, given that that's the case, what do I do? But on a broader level, in terms of systems in place, again, in the previous conversation, when you were talking about your 30-year trans journey, you were highlighting that essentially that there weren't systems in place or when someone is experiencing complex PTSD and experiencing suicidal ideation, when you were having your experiences, there were no systems in place. But when someone is having suicidal ideation, and now there are more systems in place.
Yeah.
That was something really significant that you were highlighting before. You've witnessed the culture shift, and there are more systems in place. Could you expand a bit more on that?
Well, interesting. I'm just writing. I'm actually writing what I think is going to be one of the last chapters of my memoir, and I didn't know where I was going to end it. But I think where I'm settling the book right now is when I toured with Laura Jane Grace in 2014. And that was the year when everything changed. She had come out the year before as trans, and they put out their album reflecting all of that, and was touring it, and I got a chance to tour, and I was humbled, of course, because when she came out, she was heralded as one of the first person to come out as trans in rock and roll, and I'm seething. Luckily, I kept my ego in where it should be, and I didn't say anything publicly about that, but I was so jealous. And then as it happened, her fan base happened to know about me, and let her know about my presence. And she was gracious enough to do a shout out of me and the band during an interview when she was being heralded. And she acknowledged some of the trans history, including Jane County, who was a generation before me, and did so much just by her being present. And so then I was like, okay, gotta let some of this go. And then I met her through Shannon. Shannon knew Laura from other circumstances, and set up a time when Laura was in town to meet, and I did. And meeting her face to face, I recognized her genuineness and her humanity, which, you know, all of us, we tend to, that we block, that our jealousy, our you know, turns into resentment, turns into misassumptions, and all of that fell away, of course, for me. So that was a very humbling
encounter.
Yeah, a humbling experience. And I had just finished my horrible Department of Revenue fight at that point. And so I had gone through a lot of trauma and was feeling just pretty beaten down at that time. And then as things happened, she invited me to tour. So the changes I saw firsthand was on that tour. I saw the trans youth who immediately became her new fan base. And that tour included all ages shows. So many layers of changes that I saw. But just the fact that these kids were there, it blew my mind. That just did not happen. So that was thrilling. And then to see their parents there, who were from my generation, completely supportive, and encouraging and wanting to talk to me. And I grew into my rock and roll experience when all of the rhetoric, all the tropes of trans women being predators, which you hear now, was solid. And I went out of my way to stay clear of youth because I didn't want people to criticize me or to make any assumptions that would cause me to fall into, I don't want to deal with that kind of stuff. And I just no. But here I was, and this had changed completely. And the kids were craving role models, and which is why they followed Laura, and were and it was just me touring, so I was at the merch table, and that was an unthinkable thing for somebody on tour to be at the merch table themselves and talk to them. So I got the opportunity to talk with people. It was thrilling. But the other thing that I found really interesting was that all of Laura's previous fan base, the older groups that had followed her with her band before transition, were
Against
there.
Me, yeah.
They stayed there.
Yeah.
Immediately became allies. Just boom, right there, because they stayed. And I found that fascinating to see all of the, on this side of the all ages barrier, all of these guys and whoever was there, they were immediate allies to the community. And that was a paradigm shift for me personally, but also I could see it happening to the world, to America. And I think now look at our this is 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Look at the landscape we live in. Look at the music industry. How many people are trans identified or non-binary identified in prominent places in the music industry? I remember trying to convince a music lawyer in New York, where we had a big meeting in 2001. And that was our possible break into major labels. And you get a music lawyer to represent you, and then you get sold to one of the major labels. I had this meeting right after 9/11 in November. We were just about ready to tour England, and we were in New York, and he was in a high-rise overlooking Ground Zero. So I was like, the whole band was there, you know. And my tour manager at that time, a friend of mine, had arranged the meeting, and I was looking down into the whole pit there, just thinking about the world circumstance, you know. And then we sat down at the big table in this big office. Immediately, the first thing that he wanted to know after complimenting us on our music and what we've done in performances was if I'd be willing not to be trans. If I could just be like, you know, edgy, you know, but retain this masculinity and but don't, you know, cover up the breasts, you know, do that whole thing, you know, let's just do that. And I said, no, of course, no, this is why you're talking to us, you know, this is why we're here. And he said, I knew you would say that. And he basically laid it out and said, I think what you're doing is great, but I can't sell you to a record label because they don't know what to do with anyone like you. This is 2001.
That's not the 80s, that's 2001.
2001. 20 years. 10 years later, Laura comes out. 10 years after that, look where we are. This is 2 decades. So if we can make this much difference in 20 years, imagine what we can do. Imagine where we can be if we just maintain and we don't give up.
Yes. It reminds me of what you were saying related to Pussy Riot. And we were connecting that to, again, the lyrics, we are here, every last one never will turn, even so we know fear. We know fear, and you don't have, like, rose-colored spectacles on. You're the last person to. I can remember, because we've been friends for a long time, and you were accurately predicting the election of Trump and some things that would happen.
Yeah.
And so this grounded hopefulness is completely compatible with the accurate perception and the complete lack of rose-colored spectacles that you will. They're slightly tinted. That I think is also a very defining characteristic of who you are. What is your sense of the of being both of those things?
Well, I think it's just being around for as long as I have. I kind of have experienced how things unfold, and what we tend to do. I think we're on a precipice right now, this year. I think we will see some things, not necessarily good things. And I don't know if there's any way to stop it from unfolding. But I may be wrong. But I suspect we're going to move into a difficult period. And the important thing is to know that we're not going to give up.
You're right. You're right about that too.
Yeah, we're here.
When we were meeting up to discuss the possibility of the Pride performance that is happening this Saturday, by the time that this airs, you and I found ourselves talking about a dance event
Yes.
that you previously had it was back at the Turf Club,
Yeah.
and now we are in the process of seizing the opportunity to bring that back in an evolved way that is responsive to the historical moment that we're discussing. And by the time that this airs, we may well have landed that we're going to bring some version of that night back to the VFW event hall.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about your vision for that event?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So yes, basing it on the nights I used to do, which was catering to the things I enjoyed in the communities that I had revolved in. So the trans community and the fetish community, kink community, and I wanted to create safe spaces for all of us to be together through the events I would do. And I haven't done that for a long time now. And it seems now, with the situation we're at, it feels to me very similar to Weimar Germany right before World War II, when everything kind of changed. But we had, Germany was experiencing the kind of freedom and the openness to a very large extent where we're at now. But it was on a precipice, and the fears were being eclipsed by the movement, the right-wing movement, Nazi movement at that time, and they were able to take over and change everything. Everything. Horrendous, horrible things. And I feel like, but there was that sweet spot, that time when everything seemed perfect, with this looming possibility. And I think we're on a precipice now. And I wanted to revisit the idea of creating a space where we could celebrate where we are now.
Yeah.
And to be who we are, and to enjoy and to highlight and to showcase those people who are significant in our community here, possibly beyond our community, depending on how the night comes together. But I wanted to create just a little celebratory night of entertainment and performance.
All the pretty
based
horses.
very much on the cabaret world that was there before. So I'm choosing a title based on a German version of The Blue Angel, which is the cabaret that Marlene Dietrich played a character performing during that era, called The Blue Angel, in her movie The Blue Angel, which was significant to me because I saw that movie when I was like really, like I was a kid. And it was in one of those Sunday afternoon repeat movies, and I was like blown away. And it's stuck with me. And of course, Marlena played with gender all the time. A very dynamic individual. And I just thought it was an appropriate reflection to use that as the title of our night. So,
Absolutely, yeah. When we were having that meeting...
Das Blau Enkel, I think. Das Blau. So, yeah.
Yep. When we were having a meeting about your involvement in the Pride opening ceremony on this coming Saturday, and we found ourselves talking about that night and the possibility of reviving it, when the focus on the cabaret kind of focus, when you brought that up, you spoke about maybe it would be fitting if a drag queen were to host.
Oh, we have to have an
the
MC.
event.
We have to have significant MCs that have prominence in the communities.
Yep, and things
which
are coming.
is very, very similar to what was happening back then.
Yeah, and my friend Jamie Monroe, who hosts Drag Queen Bingo at the VFW on Mondays. I ran into Jamie the other day and spoke about the idea, and Jamie is a big fan of Venus de Mars and all the pretty horses, and would
go.
like to do that. So I think this is going to land. I think what you want to happen is going to happen.
All right. Well, very good.
Hooray!
Sounds amazing.
Hooray!
Well, you'll be on it.
Oh, good.
Even
It'd be an honor.
even better. And something else that is right about to land is the music video.
Yeah.
And behind you, you have a suitcase.
Oh, yeah.
What can you just explain? Again, we're only here today doing this because Venus is primarily filming a music video for.
Well,
Evil Whiskers.
the idea that I want to do is to echo the single. There's a couple of unique things I want to do with the video. It'll be, well, I have a bunch of costumes in here. I'm going to try to fit all of these costumes in for the show so I can change clothing, you know, in rapid fire. And there'll be a zoom out element and a green screen so that I can play with background imagery, animation, found footage, landscape, you know, whatever I can come up with. So these are ideas rolling around in my head.
And you'll be editing it later. So
And I'll be editing it later.
Finding the right found footage to match up with. And the green screen is just there.
Yeah.
Where Stuart is about to arrive,
And we'll
just
kinda
like
get it
you
all-
were about to arrive earlier. And then the next thing that happens is we get off your set of your music video.
Yeah,
And,
and we'll
get the
try to
green
get it
screen
all
ready.
done. The other elements that I'm doing, because I want to reflect community, is to invite people, and I'll be doing that this month. And so here's an invite, anybody. I want non-binary, trans people of any aspect, wherever you are, to send me a short self-portrait video clip, phone video selfie, or have a friend do it, about a 3/4 body, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, looking however fabulously you want, and just being present for that video. Send me that clip, and I will include that in the music video.
Yeah. Perhaps
And-
on the green screen.
I'm gonna edit it right.
Experiment.
And what I'd like to do is to showcase how large our community is. So I'm hopeful I'll get a similar response that I did for the shout out to
Yeah.
the choir, and I hope it will come from wherever.
Yeah.
So I'm going to encourage people to spread the word, and I'm going to collect them up and make them part of the fabric of the video.
You were talking before about even if only finding oneself to be perceived as the exception to the paradigm.
Yeah.
But these kinds of very intentional decisions that you're making minimize the possibility of it only being Venus that is perceived as the exception to the paradigm.
Yes. I want to show that we are many.
We are many,
And not to be afraid. For people not to be afraid. We're just as human and complex and wonderful as every other person. And I bet if I sat down for breakfast with anybody or coffee and we just looked at the sunset or did whatever while we had our gathering, and we don't have to talk about politics at all, you know. Talk about things that we love in the world. We would find so much in common with each other.
We are many, we are free. We are one. The artwork in the previous, for the previous record, there's you and the members of all the pretty horses.
Yeah.
And there's various different destinations, multiverses, different possibilities of where one could be heading. And I think that all of this create shifts into a multiverse where instead of us all being on the conveyor belts,
Moving walkway.
moving
Yeah,
walkway
yeah.
that's heading somewhere horrible, we find ourselves with momentum heading in a different direction.
Yeah.
My dream, Venus's dream isn't so hard. Let down your guard, dear friend. And I love how this conversation that we've been having today, you've been sharing a lot about your lived experience and this isn't just an abstract idea. This isn't just an idea. It's like a cerebral philosophy. Your dream isn't so hard. You've been sharing all about that. So thank you for writing this song. Thank you for delving into it with us. I think I can hear Stuart,
I think so.
which I think is the sign that it's time for Venus to do Venus's thing, which is make the music video.
Disentangle and re-entangle.
Yeah. Thank you very much for letting us crash your music video shoot.
Yeah, thank you.
We're very
It's great
grateful.
to see you, as always.
And we'll see you, by the time this airs, this Saturday. 10 a.m. is when the whole Mears Park component begins. I gather just outside the Bulldog in St. Paul. And and then
Well, we'll see.
we'll see.
We'll see how it goes.
But head towards Mears Park, everyone. Around about 10 o'clock is when the opening ceremony begins, and during that ceremony there'll be Surly Girly, followed by Venus, and it will be a very special performance.
Yeah.
No spoilers.
Yes. Very good.
Thank you very much. I've been Simon Calder. This is Back to the City. We'll be back next Thursday at 10 p.m. See you on Saturday for St. Paul Pride in St. Paul by Mears Park. And then there'll be the parade that goes to which park? What is it?
Rice Park.
To Rice Park.
Right?
Yep.
Yes.
And we will go on that parade after these lovely people have launched it.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
See you there.